the American Islamic College from its very founding with President, Dr. Ismail al-Farouqi, that it really represents this incredible opportunity for us not just to learn what's in the books, but for us to learn one another, to learn our tradition is a tradition of many narratives. Our tradition is a tradition of many interpretive streams. Our tradition is a tradition of unity in the midst of diversity. And this is something that, rather than being threatened by it, this is something we can celebrate.
All right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
Bismillah. That video never gets old.
Well, it gets old for me because I'm hearing it, and there are all kinds of things I wish I could supplement. Saying, but for now I'll just let it stand on its own, and God willing, we'll have lots of chances to fill in the gaps as we journey forward, and once in a while talk about the college and think about the college and the transformative work and the importance of transformative education in this crazy time of climate change and political circuses and industrial violence and oppression. And so that's but for tonight, it's the loving, compassionate, unscripted engagement with this timeless text, inshallah. So is there something that leaps out to you, as we begin? This is our 8th portion. And and again, this is again, as you noted last time, that this is a surah from the earlier period of Islam, the Meccan period of Islam. And the one that we're going into tonight in this portion will also be from that earlier period, the Meccan period of Islam. But is there something that leaps out to you that you want to use as a launching pad for our discussion tonight?
There's so many things that come in every juz, but even here, one of them we were just discussing previously is, on the rise and fall of civilizations, in a sense.
Yeah.
So that's a major theme. Maybe we can touch upon that. And if we do, there's 3 verses from the previous juz that will connect really nicely to that 42 to 44 that we had to skip over last time. Then I feel, and I'd like to hear your response on this, that there's something about, if you follow the majority of the people, you will go astray, which made me think about, thinking about political theology. What does that mean? And then shortly thereafter, it says there's a few crooked people always on the top, which is, the former critique of democracy, and then the critique of oligarchy. So what kind of political theology are we getting? And then there's the section on free will, at least that one verse, towards the end of An'am. And then this interesting encounter with the jinn, and a lovely section once again on Abraham, because that was covered earlier in the surah. So those are some of the things in An'am, and those themes continue with the law of nations in A'raf. But we go back to creation, and then the address is, O children of Adam, O children of Adam, which changes from, we saw in the previous surah, O you who believe, or O humankind. Now it's O children of Adam, Ya Bani Adam. And then there's all the prophets, one after the other. And that's also very instructive to go through each of them just briefly. So lots of stuff here. We could go.
Well, since the first theme about the rise and fall of civilizations, and how that's also connected to the Quran's sense of prophetic history, that civilizations were sent people to warn them and to guide them, and they didn't listen, and they were arrogant, and then they ended up just being undone, like in a surprise moment, at a moment when they least expected. I think that's a it's a sobering message, but it's a very prevalent message in these 2 chapters that I think is worth exploring. And this exploration you say should take us back a little bit in the Surah of the Cattle, back to the last section, and then we'll trace it through. And I do have a couple of interesting points that are less overarching in terms of their thematic significance, but they are some like little jewels that are sort of shining out to me that I want to make sure we at least name before we close tonight. So why don't you take us into Rise and Fall of Civilizations?
Well, it's Surah number 6, chapter 6, verse 42 is what I'm looking at, where it's you, O Prophet. So the Prophet Muhammad is amongst the people, but the Quran will always say, well, look, you messengers have come before you. And so we sent messengers before you, Prophet, to many communities. They're people with suffering and hardship, so that they could learn humility. So here, a question came up last time right at the end on why do prophets suffer? And one answer is, because God loves them. And so in a way, it's so that he can, through their suffering and their acceptance of it, and the humbling that comes with it, comes a nearness to God. So it's counterintuitive.
It's completely counterintuitive, because when bad things happen to us, we always think, what did I do? Like, why is God punishing me?
Right.
And Muslims will respond so differently. They say, oh, God must love you, brother. God must really love you, right? For you to be going through this.
Well, because and when if you have ease, you forget God. And people start to think, well, skill and their own intellect, and maybe there isn't really a God. But when you're suffering, you're always thinking of God, because you're in need. And so you're always conscious of that need. And if you reduce existence to this material plane, this world alone, it's incomprehensible. But if you have your gaze on something that this life is really nothing, it's really an ultimate, destination for which you're preparing, then it's then it can be quite a blessing. But it's completely like you said, counterintuitive.
Yeah, and so I was just going to say, stick a little Rumi in there. Maulana says, Jalaluddin Rumi says that those people and things that make you run to God, be grateful for them, and be cautious of those friends who bring you comforts that keep you from your prayer. He said, on the path to God, sometimes your enemies can be your friends, and your friends can be your enemies.
This is why he was called the Persian Quran, because we'll read later on in this month that innama amwalukum wa awladukum fitna, your wealth and your offspring are a fitna, a trial. Because out of your love for them, you want to transgress all limits. But you've got to and your love for them can be a distraction from your duty to God. That's right. So there can be an adversarial relationship in a metaphysical sense that you have to guard from with these loving relations that you have in this world. So anyways, to continue with this, that these prophets came hardships so that they could learn humility. And then the next verse says, when suffering, or if only, I'll read Abdul Halim's translation. Okay. It's simpler English. If only they had learned humility when suffering came from us. But no, their hearts became hard, and Satan made their foul deeds alluring to them. So there's a pattern in history, and we'll observe this in the next surah, when one prophet after another is rejected. So, and this is the third verse in the sequence, so when they had forgotten the warning they had received, we opened the gates to everything for them. فَتَحْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ أَبْوَابَ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ.
Mm.
meaning the blessings of this world. They
Mm.
became completely unfettered, unchecked. They acted with impunity. And
Mm.
why? Then as they reveled in what they had been given, suddenly, that's the
Yeah.
أخذناهم بغتة. And
Mm.
so be careful of unchecked power and privilege, that this is the when the rope that God has given you is coming to an end, the leash, and it's going to be pulled back suddenly. Because do you really think you're independent and this will last forever and you can go about doing these things without consequence? I mean, that's the message of the Quran.
Yeah, and
So
it's a message that is in clear contradistinction to certain political figures who seem to have no consequence and are able to act with impunity.
yeah, so that was, that was something that was yesterday, and this theme is repeated and developed,
Yeah.
and the verses continue. So, encourage you to take a look at them. Then looked at 116. It was really an interesting verse where it says, if I marked it correctly, actually 115 and then 116, the word of thy Lord, of your Lord is complete in truth and justice. Like that's where it finds its perfection. Sidqan wa adalan. No one can change his words. He is the all-hearing, the all-knowing. And if you obeyed most of those on earth, the majority, akthara man, lead you
No.
away from the path of God. They follow nothing but speculation. And I've been on Twitter these past few years, increasingly, and if you follow the herd, there's so much speculation and just conjecture and going down rabbit holes. That's just a silly example, but people can get into this groupthink and conspiracies. And so here it says they follow nothing but conjecture. They're merely guessing, or they do nothing but lie. And so I wonder what you think about this in terms of, I'm just going to ask it straight up, in terms of democracy. And think of Farabi. I know you did a lot of studies on classical Islamic political theology.
Abu Nasr al-Farabi, and I was first introduced to al-Farabi when I was a student at Notre Dame. So they're in South Bend. And one of the things that al-Farabi says about a democracy is that a democratic society where voting is something that is a shared responsibility of the citizens, they will put into power people who reflect their own souls, and people who promise, either truly or falsely, but promise to give them what they most want and what they most seek. And so he saw democracy as being very dangerous. He said that the democratic city, because he spoke of these different societies as cities, is actually many cities, and the democratic city is actually, of all the cities, is the most difficult city for a virtuous person to live in and to remain virtuous, because it is a city where that offers everything, and so the opportunities for becoming deluded and the opportunities for a government to lead the society in the direction of delusion is so ever present. And so the virtuous city was what he always saw as being the most kind of utopian and rightly guided kind of political union. The virtuous city was a city that acknowledged God, and that acknowledged that this world is a cultivation ground for virtue and for the higher things, and of course, then that comes with, with a legal structure that many people will find oppressive, and many people will find difficult
Right.
to bear. And so, I mean, I think that, and I'm also reminded of the Prophet's hadith, his apocalyptic hadith, alayhi salatu wasalam, when he said that, Islam came into this world as something strange, and at the end times it will leave the world as something strange. So give glad tidings to those strangers,
Right.
And so clearly the reference there is that to be faithful in an apocalyptic moment, when we know that, we're promised that there will be bloodshed and chaos and all kinds of terrible things happening, to be faithful in that moment will mean not to follow the majority. It will mean to be sometimes singular, and to be willing to be a stranger, even in your own community, possibly, when everyone else is following herd. And I think we see the great moral evil, or the great moral danger of following the herd, even now in today's global political climate. It's a dangerous thing.
Right. Yeah. And I'm just thinking people will take this clip, if someone cuts the clip and says, "Oh, the AIC and these guys are against democracy." And I just want to clarify that, this is actually Western philosophy, where Plato and Aristotle, they recognized, that the virtuous city was not democratic, but that, and in Plato's political philosophy, democracy is the least worst. So when monarchy, when it's virtuous, is the best and benevolent, but when it becomes self-interested, it's the most tyrannical. And since you can't, they have low expectations of humanity and monarchy, and so they don't expect to have a virtuous monarch or an aristocracy. They expect to have an oligarchy or a tyranny. So they don't have, and so they say that democracy is the best because it's the least worst. They don't call it virtuous anyways. And so this is a critique that's along those lines, and not necessarily, advocating for a non-democratic system, but to accept it critically. At least, I just want to make it.
But what the message here seems here is that the danger of a democracy is what we see now happening, is that it can erode into populism. And when it erodes into populism in a more oligarchic kind of state, then you have a few people who are in control of the whole thing, and their intentions are not virtuous, and their policies are not virtuous, and they have the especially in today's information age, they have all the tools they need to bring the majority of people down with them.
And this brings us to verse 123. And so we have put, or thus we have placed leaders in every town, its wicked men, to plot and burrow therein. But they only plot against their own souls, and they perceive it. It's pinning it on an elite that somehow takes over and speaks on behalf of everyone, but really is leading everyone to ruin.
Wow. So we're kind of in this realm, as I mentioned a few nights ago. We're kind of in this theater of spiritual warfare, in a way. This struggle, like it's almost a kind of Zoroastrian, struggle between light and darkness kind of picture that we're receiving here. And I remarked on that. I noted in my own study in preparation for tonight, in verse 112, it said that for every prophet, right, we make an enemy, right? That the prophets don't just come down and have to deal with the mess, but it's almost as if there has to be some kind of the force has to be balanced somehow, and so the prophet has to be counterbalanced with shayateen, with these devils, as the Quran says, and these enemies. And so the prophets don't come in neutral. They come into the world with ready-made enemies who are set to oppose them and to mock them and to try to turn their messages into lies and woo the people against them. And so, I mean, I feel like the intervention of prophecy in human history is an intervention that is intended to kind of stir the pot and really, I guess, create a choice for people who are willing to think and consider. And this is something that the Quran is constantly exhorting us to do, is to, aren't you thinking? Aren't you considering? Aren't you contemplating?
Right. Yeah. And this is, this echoes in mythology, even in older traditions, light and darkness, like a tussle between, the light rises and darkness to meet it. You hear even things like this in Star Wars. And I notice you're wearing your Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yes, Obi-Wan
robe.
evening tonight.
Let's do, should we do 125, which is when God wishes to guide someone, he opens their breast lil Islam. And you see the translation as to Islam, and you view that in a very identitarian kind of way. But if you read it literally or linguistically, he opens their heart to submission.
Yeah.
When he wishes to lead them astray, and I have two translations in front of me, Abdullah Yusuf Ali and Abdul Halim. Abdul Halim says, and those whom he willeth to leave astray. So he doesn't lead them astray, but he leaves them straying. This is what it says. وَمَن
يُضِلَّهُ
يُرِدْ أَن يُضِلَّهُ. What does he do? He closes and constricts their breasts as if they were climbing up to the skies, like climbing a stairway or a hill to the sky. You run out of breath and you're tight. This is how I understood it. And
it's interesting that the heart of the people that open to faith, the heart expands, it opens, right? And those who are either caused to stray or allowed to go astray, their hearts contract and become narrow and like closed.
So this opens up the question of free will.
Yeah, it does.
But it's always resolved. So in the end of the verse, it says, "Thus doth Allah." That's one translation. Or this is how God makes the foulness of those who do not believe rebound against them. So actually, they had first made their own choice to reject, and so the constriction happened not, from the beginning, but as almost a response to their rejection of the people. But you can keep going in cycles, right? Because God created the people in a certain setting with certain capacities. And so, but as he let them down this path, despite his rahmah, these are tough questions. This is theodicy on good and evil that will remain, mystery.
And it's, and I think especially, growing up in America, I think we had this sort of radical free will sense, right? This notion that people are the masters of their own destinies, and that people make their own destiny, and we kind of love that in American film, and and we talk about the self-made millionaires and billionaires, so we have this tension between whatever God has written. In the Quran will say, in lan yusibana illa ma kataballahu lana, nothing will strike us in life except for what God has written for us. And yet we make choices, and we're responsible for those choices. And so somehow we have to find a way to live in the paradox of God's complete power and decree, and our personal responsibility for our choices, and there's no way to have one, at least within the context of faith, there's no way to have one without affirming the other. And so we just have to
Right.
live within that tension. That's how I see it.
Good. No, I just got a clarification that that second question was not Dr. Shakila's, so I just want to clarify that on the free
Oh,
will.
Okay.
It was from another viewer. But a reference real quick. This is probably,
Sure.
but have you seen The Matrix? Have you seen The Matrix?
Oh yeah. Many
Have you
times.
watched them all?
No.
Okay. You know the second one in which he meets the architect. It was a really interesting scene where he's in this room. And for those of you, if you haven't seen The Matrix, this might sound really weird, but he's in the talking to the architect, and you see him behind him, all of these screens. And as he's dialoguing with the architect, basically the one who's written the computer code, and they're in this kind of coded world called the Matrix. Before he responds, all of his possible responses kind of flash on the screen, and then it zooms into one that he chooses and acquires. And so, his actions were all created. So we say God creates your acts, but then there's a kind of mystery in the choice that we make and acquire responsibility. I found it was helpful for me to understand a little bit of Ash'ari theology of Iktisab. I don't know if it works perfectly, but for those for whom that allusion is helpful, you can check it out.
Yeah. I mean, it's deep and it's powerful. And this theology of Iktisab is this idea that we acquire responsibility for the actions that God creates through us. So it's just like,
Right.
It's crazy ambiguous, right? It's just, it's
Right.
and in the mystical realm, right? I can remember in Imam Ghazali, writing he says the highest level of affirming God's unity is seeing only God, meaning God is doing everything. God is, and he even uses this language in Arabic, la fa'ila illallah, that there is no doer in the universe except for God. And that's kind of at the peak of his own mystical awareness and his mystical vision of reality, that God is behind everything. God is doing everything. But for those of us on the ground who are far below that level of mystical vision, I think that there's no question that we make choices and we're responsible for those choices. But the extent to which we are really free, like radically free, is I think is appropriately questioned, because there are so many forces that limit the kinds of choices we can make, and there are so many determining factors that create inclinations toward one way of walking or another. And yet the Quran clearly is wanting us to make a choice. That's why it's appealing to us. It's saying, oh, you who believe, oh, children of Adam, oh, like we're being told to make a choice. And the people of the prophets, those civilizations that were destroyed, were being told to make a choice. And they were choosing to mock the prophets and to reject the signs and to abuse these messengers and to create traps and create complexities when the teachings were very simple, and to try to trip these messengers up, and clearly the Quran holds them accountable for what they did. It's a tough one.
So it's a tough one, and we're in deep theological territory. We might have to get to the stories of the prophets.
The American Islamic College, from its very founding with President, Dr. Ismail al-Faruqi, that it really represents this incredible opportunity for us not just to learn what's in the books, but for us to learn one another, to learn our tradition is a tradition of many narratives. Our tradition is a tradition of many interpretive streams. Our tradition is a tradition of unity in the midst of diversity. And this is something that, rather than being threatened by it, this is something we can celebrate.